The Deep Space Monitoring Station Artemis hung silently against the backdrop of stars, its solar arrays gleaming in the distant sunlight. Inside the station's primary observation deck, Captain Sarah Chen stood before the sprawling view of space, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic displays floating before her. 20 years of deep space monitoring, and she'd never seen anything like this. "Run the analysis again," she commanded, her voice steady despite the excitement threatening to burst from her chest. The station's AI complied silently, streams of data cascading across the screens. The signal was still there, a pattern too perfect to be natural, too complex to be human. The discovery had come 3 days ago. A burst of energy unlike anything in their databases, originating from the edges of known space. Most of her colleagues had dismissed it as an anomaly, a glitch in their aging equipment, but Sarah knew better. She'd spent her entire career searching for signs of intelligent life among the stars, and now finally, the evidence was undeniable. Her comm unit chimed. "Captain," Dr. Patel's voice crackled through the speaker, "you need to see this. The signal, it's changing." Sarah's heart raced as she sprinted through the station's curved corridors, her footsteps echoing against the metal walls. The main research lab was a chaos of activity when she arrived, screens flickering with new data as researchers scrambled to make sense of what they were seeing. "It's not just a signal anymore," Dr. Patel said, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's a message." The screens around them pulsed with light, complex patterns forming and reforming. Symbols unlike any human writing system danced across the displays, yet somehow, Sarah felt she could almost understand them. The message carried a weight, an urgency that transcended language. Then everything changed. The station's lights flickered, and a low hum filled the air. Outside the observation windows, space itself seemed to bend and twist. A point of light appeared, growing larger until it split the darkness like a tear in reality. Through this rift emerged something that defied explanation. A ship, if it could be called that. It looked more like a living crystal, its surface flowing with patterns of light that mimicked the signal they'd been studying. It was massive, easily dwarfing their station, yet it moved with impossible grace. "My God," someone whispered behind her. Sarah couldn't speak. Her training, her years of preparation for first contact, seemed inadequate in the face of what she was witnessing. The crystal ship came to rest before their station, and for a moment, everything was still. Then a beam of light connected the two vessels, and Sarah felt rather than heard a voice in her mind. "We come seeking help." The words weren't in English, weren't in any human language, but Sarah understood them perfectly. The beam of light expanded, and within it appeared figures that took her breath away. They were humanoid, but that's where the similarity to humans ended. Towering beings of pure energy and light, their forms suggesting female features, but transcending simple physical boundaries. They stood at least 15 feet tall, their bodies translucent yet solid, coursing with patterns of light that matched their ship. "I am Aria," one of the beings spoke, her voice resonating directly in Sarah's mind. "We are the Celestials, and we have traveled far to find you." Sarah stepped forward, aware that she was making history with every word. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Deep Space Monitoring Station Artemis. We welcome you." Aria's form shifted, patterns of light flowing through her like thoughts made visible. "Captain Chen, our civilization stands on the brink of extinction. We have searched countless systems for a species that might help us. Your people, humans, you have what we need to survive." The other Celestials moved closer, their presence filling the room with an energy that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand on end. They were beautiful and terrifying, ancient and new all at once. Their eyes, pools of living light, held a desperation that transcended species. "What do you need from us?" Sarah asked, though something in her already knew the answer. "Your genetic diversity," Aria replied. "Our species is dying, Captain. Millennia of isolation have led to genetic stagnation. We can no longer reproduce successfully, but humans, your adaptability, your resilience, the very chaos of your genetic code. It could save us. Sarah's mind raced with the implications. This wasn't just first contact. This was an opportunity to save an entire civilization, to merge humanity's destiny with beings of incredible advancement. But the responsibility, the risks. We understand this is much to consider, Aria continued, her form pulsing with gentle light. We do not ask this lightly. In return, we offer knowledge, technology, a partnership that could advance both our species. Around them, the station's crew stood in stunned silence. This moment would change everything: human history, science, religion, the very understanding of humanity's place in the universe. Sarah felt the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders. We need time to discuss this, she said finally, to understand exactly what you're proposing. Aria's form brightened slightly. Of course. But time is not our ally, Captain Chen. Our numbers dwindle with each passing cycle. We have perhaps one generation left before our civilization faces total collapse. As if to emphasize this point, one of the other celestials flickered briefly, their form destabilizing for a moment before reforming. Sarah saw the fear in their light patterns, the desperate hope they placed in humanity. Give us 24 hours, Sarah said. We need to contact Earth, to bring in experts who can understand the full scope of what you're asking. 24 of your hours, Aria agreed. We will wait. But remember, Captain, this is not just about saving our species. This is an opportunity for humanity to take its place among the stars, to become part of something greater than yourselves. As the Celestials withdrew to their ship, leaving behind a smaller crystal as a means of communication, Sarah turned to her crew. Their faces reflected the same mix of awe, fear, and excitement that she felt. Contact Earth, she ordered, her voice strong despite her racing heart. Tell them everything has changed. The message was sent, racing through space toward Earth at speeds that seemed painfully slow compared to the technology they'd just witnessed. As Sarah watched the crystal ship hovering outside their station, she knew that humanity stood on the brink of its greatest adventure, or perhaps its greatest challenge. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the vast expanse of Earth, someone would need to step forward and accept the Celestials' proposition. Someone would need to become the bridge between two species, the key to saving an ancient civilization. The question was, who would be brave enough to take that leap? The news of the Celestials' arrival spread across Earth like wildfire. Within hours of Sarah's transmission, the planet's greatest minds were mobilizing. Military leaders debated security protocols, religious leaders grappled with theological implications, and scientists salivated over the potential technological advances. But Dr. Marcus Rivera paid little attention to the global chaos as he studied the genetic data the Celestials had shared. In his lab at the International Genetic Research Institute, Marcus's dark eyes scanned hundreds of holographic projections showing the complex DNA structures of the Celestials. Their genetic code was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a masterpiece of evolution that had somehow painted itself into a corner. Fascinating, he muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Their genetic structure is like a perfect crystal, beautiful, but too rigid. No room for adaptation. Dr. Rivera, his AI assistant, chimed. Captain Chen is requesting entry. Marcus looked up from his work, surprised. He hadn't expected the woman who'd made first contact to visit his lab personally. Let her in. Sarah Chen entered, her presence commanding respect despite her relatively young age. Behind her floated Aria, the Celestial's luminescent form somehow more impressive in the confines of the lab than it had been in the videos Marcus had watched. Dr. Rivera, Sarah said, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Your reputation precedes you. Marcus nodded, trying not to stare at Aria. Even in her reduced size, she'd compressed her form to fit within the lab. She radiated an otherworldly beauty that made his scientific mind buzz with questions. Your genetic structure is remarkable, he said, addressing Aria directly. But I can see why you're facing extinction. Your species has achieved nearly perfect genetic optimization, but at the cost of adaptability. Aria's form pulsed with what Marcus interpreted as approval. You understand quickly, Dr. Rivera. Our pursuit of perfection has become our downfall. We can no longer produce viable offspring. Each generation becomes more unstable than the last. Marcus gestured to the holographic displays. Your DNA has essentially become too specialized. You need an injection of chaos, genetic diversity that can break up these rigid patterns and introduce new possibilities. Yes, Aria said, her voice resonating in his mind. And we believe human DNA, particularly from certain individuals, could provide that diversity. You, Dr. Rivera, are one such individual. Marcus froze, his eyes darting to Sarah, who nodded solemnly. We've been analyzing genetic profiles from Earth's leading scientists, she explained. Yours shows unique markers that the Celestials believe would be particularly compatible with their genetic structure. The implications hit Marcus like a physical force. You want me to? To help save our species, Aria completed his thought. To become what your people might call a progenitor, the father of a new generation of Celestials. Marcus's mind raced with questions. How would that even work? Our species are completely different. I'm made of ordinary matter, well, I'm not entirely sure what you are. Aria's form shifted, creating a complex display of light that demonstrated the process. We have technology that can convert genetic information between forms. Your DNA would be translated into our energy-based structure, then combined with ours to create new life. The process is complex but proven. Proven? Marcus asked sharply. You've done this before. With other species, long ago, Aria admitted, but none show the potential compatibility we see in humans, particularly in you, Dr. Rivera. Your genetic structure contains patterns that mirror our own in fascinating ways. Marcus sat heavily in his chair, his world spinning. He was a scientist, devoted to understanding the building blocks of life. He'd never imagined becoming part of an experiment that could reshape two species. What would this mean for the children, he asked. Would they be human, celestial, something in between? They would be something new, Aria said, her light patterns shifting to show potential combinations. A bridge between our species, carrying the best of both. Our knowledge and connection to energy itself, combined with human adaptability and creativity. Sarah stepped forward. Dr. Rivera, I know this is overwhelming, but the potential benefits for humanity are extraordinary. The Celestials are offering to share technology that could solve our energy crisis, cure diseases, even unlock the secrets of faster-than-light travel. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the night sky where the celestial ship now hung visible to all, a new star in Earth's heavens. His whole life, he'd searched for answers about life, about the fundamental nature of existence. Now those answers were literally standing in his lab, offering him a chance to be part of something unprecedented. What about the risks? He asked, turning back to face them. This kind of genetic manipulation, crossing species barriers this vast, there are a million things that could go wrong. Aria's form dimmed slightly. There are risks, yes, but extinction is certain if we do nothing. We ask not just for our sake, but for the potential of what our species could achieve together. Marcus looked at the genetic displays again, his scientific mind already racing with possibilities. The challenges were enormous, but so the potential rewards. This could be the greatest scientific achievement in human history, or its greatest disaster. I need time, he said finally. Time to study the data, to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Of course, Aria said, though her form flickered with what might have been anxiety. But please understand, Dr. Rivera, our time is limited. Already, some of our younger ones struggle to maintain physical form. As if to emphasize her point, a hologram appeared showing a nursery of sorts, where young celestials flickered and wavered like candles in the wind. The sight tugged at something deep in Marcus's heart. 3 days, he said firmly. Give me 3 days to study everything you can share about the process. Then I'll give you my answer. Sarah and Arya exchanged looks. 3 days, Sarah agreed. But the world will want answers sooner. How should we proceed with public announcements? Marcus hadn't even considered the public aspect. How would humanity react to learning that one of their own might become the progenitor of a hybrid species? The implications were staggering. Tell them the truth, he said finally, but emphasize the scientific aspects. This isn't about one person, it's about the future of 2 species. As Sarah and Arya left his lab, Marcus turned back to the genetic displays. Somewhere in the complex dance of molecules and energy lay the key to saving an ancient civilization. But first he had to decide if he was willing to become more than just an observer, to become part of the very phenomenon he'd spent his life studying. The next 3 days would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire human race. 3 days felt like 3 minutes in Marcus's lab. He hadn't slept, sustained only by coffee and the burning need to understand. Holographic displays surrounded him, showing endless streams of genetic data, simulation results, and probability calculations. The Celestials had shared everything: their complete genetic history, detailed accounts of previous attempts at hybridization, and the full specifications of their energy conversion technology. Run the simulation again, Marcus commanded his AI assistant, his eyes burning from exhaustion. Factor in the modified telomere preservation sequence. The holographic display shifted, showing the complex dance of human and celestial DNA merging, separating, recombining. This time, the simulation showed a 73% stability rate, the highest yet, but still far from certain success. A soft chime announced a visitor. Marcus didn't need to look up to know who it was. Enter, he called out. Arya's luminescent form flowed into the lab, her presence immediately filling the space with a subtle energy that made the hair on Marcus's arms stand up. She had visited each day, answering his endless questions with patience and growing hope. You haven't slept, she observed, her voice carrying a note of concern. Marcus smiled warily. Sleep is overrated when you're trying to save a species. He gestured to the latest simulation results. We're making progress. The stability rates are improving. Arya moved closer, her form casting patterns of light across the data displays. Your dedication is moving, but today we need more than data. We need your decision. Marcus stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of immobility. He walked to the window, where Earth sprawled below the orbital research station. From up here, his homeworld looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos his potential decision would unleash. I've been thinking about my parents, he said quietly. They were both scientists. They taught me that knowledge wasn't just about understanding. It was about using that understanding to help others. He turned to face Arya. They also taught me to consider all the consequences of my actions. Arya's form rippled with what Marcus had learned to recognize as emotional response. And what consequences concern you most? Where do I start? Marcus ran a hand through his disheveled hair. The physical risks to myself during the energy conversion process. The psychological impact of potentially being the progenitor of a new species. The social implications for both our civilizations. The religious and ethical debates this will spark on Earth. He paused. And then there's the children themselves. The children? Arya's form brightened with interest. Yes. What kind of life will they have? Will they be caught between 2 worlds, never fully belonging to either? Will they face discrimination, fear, isolation? Marcus's voice grew passionate. I'm not just making a decision about my own life. I'm making a decision that will affect generations of beings who never asked for this responsibility. Arya was silent for a moment, her light patterns shifting in complex ways. Finally, she spoke. May I show you something? At Marcus's nod, she raised her hands, and the lab filled with a holographic display unlike anything he'd seen before. It showed a vast library, its crystalline shelves stretching seemingly forever, filled with patterns of light that Marcus somehow knew were books, the collected knowledge of the celestial civilization. This is our great archive, Arya explained. Millions of years of science, art, philosophy, and history. Everything we are, everything we've learned. The image shifted, showing empty shelves, growing darkness. Without new generations to learn from it, to add to it, to challenge and improve it, all of this will be lost. Not just knowledge, but an entire way of seeing and understanding the universe. The image changed again, showing what looked like a celestial school. Young ones, their forms still developing, learned to manipulate energy and matter in ways that defied human physics. But some of them flickered dangerously, their forms threatening to dissolve. Our children are born with all our knowledge, but they lack the stability to use it, Arya continued. Each generation becomes more fragile than the last. We are watching our future fade away. Marcus felt his throat tighten. As a scientist, the loss of so much knowledge was heartbreaking. As a human being, the sight of those struggling children struck something deeper. "Show me the hybridization process again," he said suddenly. "Not the technical details. I want to see exactly what would happen." Arya complied, creating a new hologram. Marcus watched as a human form was surrounded by celestial energy, their very atoms being transformed into something new. The process looked painful, but the result was beautiful, a being that combined human solidity with celestial light, capable of existing in both forms. "The first transformation is the most difficult," Arya admitted. "But once completed, you would be able to shift between forms at will. You would retain your human consciousness, your memories, yourself, but gain abilities and understanding beyond current human potential." Marcus turned to his computer, pulling up his final analysis. "According to my calculations, the process has a 68% chance of complete success, a 24% chance of partial success with complications, and an 8% chance of failure." He looked at Arya. "Those aren't terrible odds for something never before attempted with humans." "You've made your decision," Arya said. "It wasn't a question." Marcus nodded slowly. "I have conditions, though. First, we document everything. Every step, every outcome, success or failure. Future generations need to understand exactly what we did and why." "Agreed." "Second, if we succeed, the children need to have contact with both civilizations. They need to understand both their heritages." "Of course." "And third," Marcus took a deep breath. "If something goes wrong, if I don't survive the process, make sure my research helps the next person who tries. Don't let my death be meaningless." Arya's form flared brightly. "You honor us with your courage, Dr. Rivera. But I believe you will succeed. There is something in you, something we've seen in the best of humanity, that makes me certain." Marcus walked to his desk and pressed his palm to the security scanner. A message flashed across his screen. "Decision logique. Protocol initiated." "Then let's save your people," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "When do we begin?" "Now," Arya replied, her form glowing with hope. "The future begins now." The celestial transformation chamber looked nothing like Marcus had imagined. Instead of cold, clinical machinery, he faced what appeared to be a living crystal sphere, its surface rippling with patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The chamber floated in the center of a vast room aboard the celestial mothership, surrounded by a dozen of their finest scientists. "Are you certain you want to proceed?" Sarah Chen asked, standing beside him in her protective suit. She'd insisted on being present, representing both Earth's interests and offering human support. Marcus nodded, his mouth dry. "I've never been more certain of anything." He looked down at his hands, wondering if this would be the last time he saw them in purely human form, though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified. Arya approached, her luminescent form somehow seeming both more solid and more ethereal in her own environment. "Fear is natural, Marcus. But remember, we will guide you through every step. Your consciousness will remain intact, though your experience of reality will expand." The chamber opened like a blooming flower, revealing an interior that shimmered with possibilities. Marcus took a deep breath and removed the medical sensors the human doctors had insisted on attaching. They wouldn't survive the transformation anyway. "Last chance to back out," he said, trying to joke. No one laughed. As he stepped into the chamber, Aria's voice echoed in his mind. "Focus on your breath. Let your consciousness expand. Don't fight the changes." The crystal sphere closed around him, and for a moment, Marcus floated in perfect silence. Then it began. The first sensation was warmth, spreading from his core to his extremities. Not uncomfortable, but intense, as if every cell in his body was awakening to a new possibility. Colors he had never seen before bloomed in his vision, and he became aware of energy patterns he had previously been blind to. Then came the pain. It wasn't like anything he had experienced before, not sharp or burning, but fundamental, as if his very atoms were being unraveled and rewoven. He wanted to scream, but his body was beyond such physical responses. He was becoming something else, something more. Through it all, Aria's presence remained, a beacon in the chaos of transformation. "Let go," her voice urged in his mind. "Don't cling to your old form. Let yourself become." Marcus felt his consciousness expanding, touching realms of existence he had never imagined. He could sense the energy fields that permeated everything, could see the quantum dance of particles that made up reality itself. His human mind struggled to process these new sensations, threatening to overwhelm him. "Too much," he tried to say, but words were meaningless now. He was light and energy and thought all at once. The celestial scientists monitored his transformation, their own forms pulsing with concern as they watched his human structure dissolve and reform. They had never seen a transformation quite like this. Most species they had attempted this with had either failed immediately or transformed too completely, losing their original nature. But Marcus was doing something unprecedented. He was maintaining his human consciousness while embracing his new form. Hours passed, though time had lost all meaning for Marcus. Gradually, the chaos began to settle. He felt himself coalescing into something new, neither purely human nor purely celestial, but a bridge between worlds. When the chamber finally opened, the being that emerged was extraordinary. Marcus stood nearly 12 feet tall, his form composed of swirling energy that retained a humanoid shape. His consciousness remained his own, but it had expanded far beyond human limitations. "Marcus." Sarah's voice seemed to come from a great distance. "Are you still you?" He turned to look at her, and Sarah gasped. His eyes were windows into infinity, swirling with stars and possibilities. When he spoke, his voice resonated on multiple levels of reality. "I'm here," he said, marveling at how his words carried not just sound, but layers of meaning. "I'm still me, but more." Aria approached him, her own form harmonizing with his new energy patterns. "How do you feel?" Marcus lifted his hands, watching as they shifted between solid and energy forms at his will. "It's incredible. I can see everything. Quantum fields, dark matter, the very fabric of spacetime." He paused, overwhelmed by sensation. "But it's also terrifying. How do you handle all this input?" "You will learn," Aria assured him. "Just as a human child learns to filter sensory input, you will learn to manage your expanded awareness." The other celestial scientists moved closer, their forms radiating curiosity and excitement. The transformation had been more successful than they had dared hope. Already, they could see how Marcus's human adaptability was expressing itself in his new form, creating possibilities they had never imagined. But amid the triumph, Marcus felt a sudden wave of vertigo. His new form flickered, temporarily losing cohesion. Aria steadied him, her energy field intertwining with his. "The first day is the most difficult," she explained. "Your consciousness is adjusting to its new reality. You need rest." "Rest." Marcus laughed, the sound creating ripples in the energy field around them. "How can I rest when every atom in the universe is singing to me?" Like this, Arya said, and showed him how to dim his awareness, to focus his consciousness into a more manageable state. It was like closing his eyes, but on a cosmic scale. As his awareness settled, Marcus became aware of something else, a deep connection to the celestials around him, particularly to Arya. He could sense their hopes, their fears, their desperate need for the success of this experiment. "It worked," he said softly, reality of what they had achieved finally sinking in. "We actually did it." Sarah, watching from behind her protective shield, activated her comm link to Earth. "Control, this is Captain Chen. Transformation successful. Subject is stable and conscious. We're looking at a whole new chapter in human evolution." As the news traveled back to Earth, Marcus began to explore his new abilities under Arya's guidance. He learned to shift between forms, to perceive different layers of reality, to manipulate energy in ways that defied his old understanding of physics. But with each new discovery came new questions. How would Earth react to what he had become? Could others follow his path? And most importantly, what would this mean for the future children he would help create? Beings who would be born into this extraordinary dual nature. The answers would come in time. For now, Marcus had to learn to simply be what he had become, a bridge between worlds, the first of his kind, but certainly not the last. 1 month after his transformation, Marcus stood in the Celestial Genetic Laboratory, his energy form flowing seamlessly between the complex crystalline structures that served as their research equipment. What once would have seemed alien and incomprehensible now felt natural, even intuitive. His human scientific knowledge, combined with his new celestial understanding, gave him unique insights into their work. "The key is in the quantum entanglement patterns," he explained to the assembled celestial scientists, his form projecting complex mathematical models into the space around him. "Human DNA has natural quantum properties we never fully understood before. It's not just a biological molecule, it's a quantum information storage system." Arya moved beside him, her energy field harmonizing with his in a way that still sent shivers through his consciousness. Over the past month, she had become more than just his guide. She had become his partner in every sense, their minds and energy patterns naturally drawn together in ways neither had anticipated. "Show them the new simulation," she suggested, her thought patterns intertwining with his. Marcus nodded, adjusting the holographic display to show their latest breakthrough. "By maintaining quantum coherence during the genetic merger, we can preserve both human adaptability and celestial energy manipulation abilities. The key is not to force the combination, but to let the patterns find their natural resonance." The other celestials pulsed with excitement as they observed the simulation. Their own attempts at genetic preservation had always focused on maintaining their pure energy form. Marcus's hybrid approach opened up entirely new possibilities. "When can we begin the actual creation process?" asked one of the elder celestials, their form flickering with the instability that plagued their species. Marcus shifted back to his human form, something he did when he needed to focus on particularly delicate matters. The ability to switch between states had proven invaluable, allowing him to approach problems from both perspectives. "The simulations are promising," he said carefully, "but there are still risks. We need to ensure the quantum stability of the combined genetic pattern before we attempt to create new life." Arya moved closer, her energy field gently supporting his human form. "Marcus is right. We've waited millennia. We can wait a little longer to do this correctly." But time wasn't entirely on their side. In the months since his transformation, 3 young celestials had lost their cohesion, their energy patterns dissolving back into the universal field. Each loss was felt deeply by the entire community, and by Marcus himself, who now shared their collective consciousness to some degree. Later, in their private chamber, Marcus and Arya discussed the broader implications of their work. The room was a marvel of celestial architecture, its walls shifting between solid crystal and pure energy in response to their emotions. "What troubles you?" Arya asked, sensing the turbulence in his energy pattern. Marcus materialized a holographic representation of Earth. I'm worried about how this will change both our species. The children we create, they won't be just celestial or human. They'll be something entirely new. Aria's form shifted closer, her energy interweaving with his in what had become that intimate gesture of comfort. Is that not the nature of evolution? To become something new? Yes, but this isn't natural evolution. We're deliberately creating a new form of life, one that will have powers and abilities beyond anything either of our species has known. He paused, his form flickering with concern. With great power comes great responsibility, an old human saying that seems particularly relevant now. You fear they will misuse their abilities. Marcus shook his head, his energy patterns swirling with complex emotions. I fear they won't have a choice in their destiny. We're creating them to save your species, but what about their own desires, their own dreams? Aria was silent for a moment, her form pulsing with thoughtful patterns. Perhaps that is why you were chosen, Marcus. Not just for your genetic compatibility or scientific knowledge, but for your humanity, your ability to consider the moral implications of our work. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent signal from the genetic lab. One of their test samples had shown unexpected activity. They rushed back, shifting through the crystal corridors with the speed of thought. In the lab, a small containment field held what appeared to be a swirling pattern of light and matter, the first successful combination of human and celestial genetic material. It was beautiful, a dance of energy and information that seemed to hold endless possibilities. The quantum coherence is stable, Marcus observed, his consciousness extending to analyze the pattern. And look, there's already signs of adaptation. It's learning, evolving even at this molecular level. The other scientists gathered around, their forms bright with excitement. This was more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was proof that their two species could truly combine, could create something new and viable. We need to monitor it carefully, Aria said, her scientific training asserting itself through her excitement. Document every change, every adaptation. Marcus nodded, but his attention was caught by something else, a subtle resonance in the genetic pattern that reminded him of music. The combination of human and celestial DNA wasn't just stable, it was harmonious, as if the two forms of life had been waiting to find each other. It's beautiful, he whispered, his form unconsciously shifting closer to Aria's. She responded by intertwining her energy field with his, sharing his wonder at what they had created. This is just the beginning, she said softly. Think of what our children will see, what they will become. The word "our" sent a shock through Marcus's consciousness. Despite all their work together, despite their growing closeness, they hadn't directly discussed the personal implications of their project. But now, looking at the swirling pattern of combined genetic material, he realized that this was more than just a scientific endeavor. They were creating a future, not just for the celestial species, but for both their peoples. And in doing so, they were creating something else. A love that transcended physical form, a partnership that bridged the gap between stars. The sample continued its elegant dance in the containment field, unaware that it represented the dawn of a new era for two civilizations. But for Marcus and Aria, watching it together, it was also a promise. A glimpse of a future they would build together, one that would change the very nature of life itself.